Welcome back to the program. We're glad you've stayed with us. Of course, if you're just joining us, this is the first edition of your favorite Pan-African show, Bottomline Africa, right on KTN News. Of course, it is the first show this year, 2018. And earlier on a Twitter poll, we did ask you, do you think Donald Trump's comment will strain US-Africa relation? Do you think Donald Trump's comment will strain US-Africa relations? He made some unprintable words referring to, black countries, including Africa, actually referred to these countries as a shithole. So to help me discuss this and what this means, especially to the relations between Africa and the US, I'm now joined once again by Nakia White, Hassan Kuchore, as well as Abel Oyeyo. Good evening, gentlemen and lady, welcome to the show. Now, let me begin with you, Abel. And a number of African countries apparently once again have summoned US diplomats in the wake of the President Trump remarks. And these countries include South Africa, Botswana, Ghana, as well as Senegal. I'm not seeing Kenya anywhere, Abel.
Well, I think that is because the Kenyan president, of course, who should spearhead the rebellion or the revolt, is, I think, fairly used to Trump. And I think what we need is a fair understanding of the kind of person Trump is. And I want to commend the president, of course, for not responding. This is a man who was elected because he was talking about blocking Syrian refugees from going to the United States. So we are not seeing anything new from him. And the buck stops with Africans. The currency of political respect in foreign relations is economic power.
Yes.
If African countries cannot support their own citizens, build the economies, grow the economies, and make sure that citizens do not move to countries like the US in search of opportunities, we cannot get respected. If every single time we have guys traveling to the US in search of the so-called greener pastures, we'll never be respected. So I think the reference to African countries, black countries, as whatever he did, is justified because we need to get our act together.
Yes.
You can see what has been happening in Libya. Blacks are being sold. It's like we've gone back to the 18th century when blacks could be sold like what? Like cows. So we need to work as Africans and keep our continent moving so that we don't have to see our young men and women.
Yes, let me pose this question to Nakia. First of all, Nakia, I'd like to hear your reaction towards that comment that was made by President Trump. And do you agree with Abel that, the reason as to why we get to hear this kind of remarks is because Africa is not economically endowed?
Well, listen, with reference to Trump, I'm really not surprised at all. I mean, the rhetoric that typically comes from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue at this point doesn't surprise me. It disappoints me. It continues to disappoint me, but certainly not surprising. And in terms of, an African continent or countries in Africa needing to up their economic game, I think that's best said by, someone who lives here, who is African themselves. So I think that I can say, as an American who's living on the continent, it's a disappointment and it's embarrassing, quite frankly, and certainly not what I expect or many of my colleagues expect from the president of the free world.
Now, speaking of a president of a free world, Nakia, one of the publications in the US, that is the Daily Stormer, says, quote unquote, about, this is the reaction towards President Trump's comment. And they said, quote unquote, encouraging and refreshing. Is this necessarily how the US sees Africa?
Well, I think, it really depends on the segment. I think what Donald Trump does really well is he banters to his base, right? He feeds them red meat whenever he has a chance, and this is one of these things. And listen, at the end of the day, this is a president that, from all appearances, has been brought up in a society and a culture and a family, if you will, that has been dominated by racist thoughts and racist beliefs. So it's unfortunate that that's what we're hearing from the president. And certainly, if there is a newspaper, which I've read that article, and commentators who are kind of, seconding his comments, I mean, it just goes to show you how people really feel about, relations and divisiveness and what it means to them in terms of bringing the country together. So it's unfortunate.
Yes. Now, Hassan, this is a question that we've already posed to our viewers following that remarks. And do you think moving forward, the remarks that was made by Donald Trump is going to affect the relationship between these African countries and the US in any way?
Thanks for that question, Yusuf. I think it's a strong one, but it risks to reproduce the kind of generalization and homogenization of Africa, because you're talking about U.S. As a country, and Africa as a continent. So what do we mean by diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Africa? I think this plays into the hands of, the way, Africa is portrayed as a country. I mean, there are enough parody, blogs and accounts out there, basically trying to mimic this kind of ignorance on the part of, Americans and, largely Europeans, that Africa is not, a vast continent, but one country. So quickly, in terms of the diplomatic relations, I think as you outlined earlier, a few countries have already expressed their outrage and basically summoned the ambassadors and the American ambassadors. Botswana is quite an interesting case where they're asking whether actually Botswana should be basically categorize itself as a whatever shithole country. So yeah, these kinds of questions are obviously supposed to trigger some kind of diplomatic response. So apart from that, I think of course the Trump administration will try to do some level of damage control. So diplomatically, I don't think there's much to write home about, apart from this superficial kind of political rhetoric. But I think the backlash is it's going to basically complicate the international relations in the United States itself, because the response has been quite radical from different groups, and that of course will also spill over into the African continent, and I think socially and at that level politically things might get a bit interesting and complicated.
Already we've seen a lot of criticism from several African leaders. Now, Nakia, do you agree with Hassan that this might blow over or spill over into some and bring about forth some sort of a strained relationship between Africa and the US?
Well, listen, I think when you hear President Trump speak, the comments that he makes, the tweets that he tweets often or retweets, it really does signal to the rest of the world, or make the rest of the world leaders question whether or not he is a reliable ally and whether America remains a reliable ally. So not only does I think it hurt or strains the relationships between the African continent, but I think it's straining the relationship around the world and calling into question, matters of reliability. And it's concerning to me and certainly many other people.
Nakia, let me just put this in black and white. Do you consider that remark, so that comment that was made by Trump as racist?
Absolutely. There's no question about it, right? So I think I've spoken to a number of my friends who live here, who are Kenyan, who are Nigerian, who are Ghanaian, who have a different thought about his comments. It's more about kind of the country and the way that politicians are running the country. I happen to have a different thought about that, and that relates to when you say, I would prefer, or as he did, the president of the United States, I prefer to have people from Norway as opposed to people from black and brown countries. I think is absolutely, a deep bed of racism. And certainly when we think about Norway, I don't know very many Norwegians who want to come to the United States because they have such a great country that they're living in, and one of the happiest countries. They're doing economically well. Their GDP is pretty relatively strong. Not only that, I think when you look at President Trump, and this has nothing to do with Norwegian itself, but when you look at President Trump and his comments and supporting his past support of the KKK and or what seems to be his past support of the KKK and alt-right movement, and you think about the Nazis, and you think about the KKK, you think about alt-right. When you think about Norwegian in Germany, you also think about Aryan and that region, or the Nordic region, being one of the most purest regions. And again, that is just a mindset of a segment of the population that seem to be on the extreme right.
Abel, it seems his comment once again has sparked racist comment and debate. Do you think he speaks on behalf of the whole country?
Well, of course, he doesn't. He's speaking on behalf of his constituency, which is around 32% of the American voting population. Now, once again, I want to declare Trump's comments as disrespectful but not racist. Now, if he talks about...
I disagree.
Yeah, he's not racist.
I disagree.
I'll give you time to react to that.
Yeah.
So the point is, if Trump is referring to countries, let's say in the eastern part of Europe where there's a lot of poverty and all that, I think he'd use the same kind of reference. The point is, respect in international relations is earned, it's not given. You cannot expect guys traveling from DRC, which is the size of Western Europe, with all the minerals you can imagine, traveling to the US, and you expect Trump to respect them. No one can respect that. The best way for African countries to be respected is to earn it. They have to make use of the resources they have. They have to reduce corruption. Like that, you can be respected. If the US was benefiting in a big way from African countries, Trump, the president of the US, couldn't have used that kind of reference. That is it. The currency of respect in foreign relations is economic power. We don't have that. And until we develop that, we'll be disrespected, we'll be abused, and it will continue.
Nakia apparently wanted to react to what Abel says. There's some note. Do you agree with him that if you need to earn respect, you have to be economically well?
No, I disagree with him on so many points. I think, the one question is where Africa is economically and politically. That's one question. And we can look at so many other countries, including Greece, where they are politically and economically, and question whether or not they have respect. But what it boils down to with President Trump is really about color. From the time that he ran for office to the time that he was elected to office, we look at the comments that he made about Muslims. We look about the comments that he's made about immigrants. We look at how he bashes, whenever he gets a chance, one of the most remarkable presidents in recent history, Barack Obama. Barack Obama is Kenyan American when he came here. That's what he said. He was remarkable and had very little, if any, scandals during his time. And still, there's very little respect that President Trump shows to him. So I really don't believe that respect has anything to do with this president. I think it has a lot to do with race and color being kind of the base of a lot of his rhetoric.
And definitely his rhetoric has become a center of attention in American media. As much as I quoted an earlier publication that was in support of Donald Trump, a lot of other outlets criticized his remarks. Let's listen to this clip first.
Guys, I don't know how to break this to you, but I think the president might be racist. No, wait, hear me out. I know I sound crazy. And you know what? Personally, as someone from South Pole, I'm offended, Mr. President. Okay, I'm offended. Because not only does he think brown countries are holes, he thinks what? We're never gonna know what he said? I mean, don't get me wrong, it might take a few weeks, but as soon as the news donkey reaches our village, we'll be so mad. So mad. Like, what do you think? And I know that everyone's focusing on him calling country holes and whatever, and I'm like, whatever, you can say whatever you want. But you know what part really put it over the line for me is Norway. Yeah. When he said where he wanted immigrants to come from, he didn't just name a white country. He named the whitest country. Yeah, he didn't even go with like a more subtle country that might leave it up in the air, Like, we need to let in more people from Portugal. And you're like, what does that mean? No, he goes with Norway. People are super white, so white they wear moon screen. That's how white they are. It's almost like yesterday when Trump met with the Prime Minister of Norway, he was like, what do you guys do with your black people? And she was like, oh, we don't have any. He was like, wow.
Very interesting indeed. Now, Hassan, of course, we are in Africa. It's a very conservative continent. We're not privileged to mention those names very freely. Abel mentioned something very interesting. He doesn't consider that remark or that, statement made by Trump as racist, Hassan.
I mean, agree with Nakia that, and of course Trevor Noah, that that's outrightly racist. I mean, he look at Haiti, the country that he talked about. Look at the whole continent of Africa. I mean, there's a section of it that is not that white, but 90% of it is white. And given the political rhetoric, the history, of Trumpism as an ideology, basically it's supposed to kind of advance, white supremacist and very national sense of white nationalism. So I think this has to be read in context. And once he mentions Haiti and Africa, I don't think you can, avoid looking at it through that racial lens. But I mean, it's just juvenile vocabulary. It's xenophobic, whether you want to say xenophobia and racism are one and the same or not. It's undiplomatic, it's unpresidential, and it deserves all the criticism and analysis that it's drawing and all the reactions.
Well, Abel, it seems Hassan and Nakia have disagreed with you, but there's a viewer here, Samuel Oruto, who says, we did ask, of course, the question if they think that comment by Donald Trump will strain US-Africa relations. This is what he had to say. He says, no, it won't strain any relationship. You can do anything you want to a hungry child, and still the child will come running to you unless Africa empowers itself economically to be independent, both political and economically. Basically, he's trying to rub his stamp, whatever you said, Abel.
That is correct. And to add to that, the point is very simple. Trump is a businessman. That is his background. And he gets to respect you and you can bring something to the table. That is it. Now, let me commend our president for not complaining, because that is not what we need to do. What we need to do is to take the message, we're being abused, we're being disrespected, just because we expect so much from the US and the rest of the, Europe. Now, when you look at a country like Rwanda, 55% to 60% of its GDP is supported by foreign aid from Western Europe and the United States. Now, that kind of president cannot complain, because if he does make any statement, which of course will anger Trump, the help will not be there. So the best way to build respect is to be dependent economically. So, and the relationship between African countries and the US won't be affected, because like the response has observed, it's a father-child kind of relationship. We expect so much from them and we give nothing in return. So we'll go back and keep begging. So
Yes, Abel, you've already mentioned that he's a businessman. Do you think he should be a president first, then businessman later? Because actually, we have a very interactive session here on Twitter. Alex says, it's very disappointing to see the leader of the free world being the exact tool of division and hate.
Absolutely.
He shouldn't be. Okay, of course, Trump is Trump. He has a business background. He's not your typical politician. And he's come in, and of course, he's done all the things we could not have expected from a leader of the free world. By now, I expect world leaders to get used to the Trump we have now. Americans are, of course, not excited with this kind of leadership, but he's president.
Yes.
Now, again, what happens is, like I said earlier, the currency of respect in foreign relations is economic power. Trump can never respect anybody. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. If you show up with a begging bowl and you're white, he'll still dismiss you. That is it.
And Abel, of course, let me engage.
I disagree.
Let me engage
Absolutely
Nakia.
disagree.
Nakia, let me just pose this question. Let's talk about the popularity of America out there as a superpower and everything. At the moment, both North and South Korea are negotiating and talking to each other, minus the United States of America. So what does that mean? Is it because of the kind of leadership that America has now?
No, I think it's because North Korea and South Korea understand that if they, press the nuclear bomb, that things are over for both of them, not just one. I mean, they're just, it's like Haiti and Dominican Republic. They share the same, basic island. So certainly they understand the basic humanity of saving their own skin. So probably, what Trump said in having, the Rocket Man comment and having his hand on the missile may have done more to say this guy is not all there, and let's get it together amongst ourselves and sort this thing out. In terms of my fellow panelist and the comment that he made about respect, I think the point that he's missing is in Trump's eyes, in Trump's administration, unfortunately, if you are black and brown, you can be nearly perfect, almost perfect, more than perfect. And if you are black or brown, he is not going to see you the same way. There are so many examples of that, where you see him greeting a bunch of people, but when it comes to shaking their hands, but when it comes to a black or brown person, he walks past them. Or the comments that he's made. There are way too many examples just to say that this is about respect. Respect has nothing to do. We had, again, one of the most remarkable presidents in recent history, and Barack Obama, who did more for the country, I think, than many other presidents. And probably people will disagree, but that happens to be my personal belief. And still there's a lack of respect there. So I adamantly disagree with that point of view that you have to gain respect for this particular president to now respect you back. I think it makes no difference.
And Hassan, let me just get your final comment here. Of course, U.S. once again positions itself as a superpower out there. And apparently, once again, both North and South Korea are negotiating minus the U.S. Of course, the U.S. has been very instrumental in the negotiations. Do you think with the Trump presidency, the U.S. is going to get a very tough time out there?
I'd first like to respond to Abel's argument the whole evening that it's because of the economic power that Trump is being disrespectful and basically, patronizing African countries. I think that's a very historical argument, given that the American economic power itself is built on, the African sweat and blood. You can't forget, the highest forced migration, that is the slave trade. To argue that actually African countries are lazy and all that, because, and that's the reason as to why America is behaving in a very patronizing fashion, is to ignore that history, and it is also to ignore the demographics of America itself, given that, the African-American population is significant, the Latinos. So demographically, that plays into the hands of, the white supremacists who kind of construct America as this white, country relating to, continents like Africa on a very black and white terms. So we have to understand that America itself is a product and continues to derive, economic power from the black population of African descent particularly. And in terms of the politics, Trumpism, of course, transcends Trump himself as a person. And it's a politics of, as I said, narrow white nationalism. And it's trying to basically peel back, the black president, Obama, that we had. The intellectual Ta-Nehisi Coates has written something called My President Was Black. And basically trying to show how this whole Trumpism and the Trump administration is trying to peel back some of the gains, in terms of civil rights, from way back, in terms of, black representation, in the social and political imagery, and all the kind of racial politics, Black Lives Matter, and all these things. So I guess it's trying to basically cultivate and perpetuate white supremacist ideology that luckily a lot of liberal media is also trying to peel back. Like, what you just showed us, Trevor Noah, and a lot of other people who are trying to parody his sentiments and also trivializing it in the process.
Pretty much,
the same
yes.
is also happening on social media, as you have seen, with the hashtag shithole and all that. So as much as he's trying to
we're going to see a lot of hashtags, definitely. Thank you, Hassan, for that. I think you've pretty much delivered your point. Speaking about Black Lives Matter and all these campaigns, Nakia, I'd like to hear a final comment on this. As an African American, how do you feel under Trump's presidency?
Oh boy. Okay, so how much time do I have to answer that question?
You have like 30 seconds, I believe.
30 seconds. I remain disappointed. I remain dismayed. I remain embarrassed. But I also remain hopeful because I know that he is not, his base is not what America has become. And certainly America is better than that. And the people in America are better than that. And I think that you'll see a rising up of people that are fighting against his rhetoric, fighting against his divisiveness, fighting against his hatred. And just fighting. And for the record, I come from both sides of the coin, but in terms of being a mixed person. So, I have family members that voted for Trump, and I have family members that voted for, Hillary Clinton. So it's just really super important to me that, people on the continent, people in Kenya know that America is better than that. And while we have a president that is spewing hatred and divisiveness, it is not what America is about.
Thank you, Nakia, for that. Of course, Nakia is a crisis management communication expert. We also had Hassan Kuchuru, who is a political analyst, as well as Abel Oyeyo, who is an international affairs expert. Many thanks for your input. Now, before we go over to our editorial tonight, let's take a look at our proverb of the day. Finally, from that Ethiopian proverb, it's about time we go straight to a bottom line editorial, and since it's going hand in hand with what Abel has earlier mentioned. Now, more than 150 years after the abolition of slavery, Mr. Trump's comments has once again ripped open the jarring debate of racism. Only this time round, it's being shot straight and openly from the top. That is the White House. Without further ado, the Trump administration should know that unemployment, lack of proper health care, insecurity, these are things that equally affects everyone, and that is not enough to refer to any country or anyone as. I'm not going to refer to that. I'm not going to mention that word once again. Now, what he has done, or he has confirmed, is that, some sort of a patronizing view of Africa, as well as promoting a racist agenda. But his comments should also serve as a wake-up call to African leaders, especially those still deeply involved in graft and propagating social injustices. They are the ones to blame for such comments being preferred against us. They should also style up. They should wake up and smell the coffee. And that is the bottom line tonight. Many thanks for watching. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. Once again, remember this program is aired every Monday to Thursday from 10 to 11 p.m. Until tomorrow, same place, same time. Bye-bye and enjoy the rest of your evening.